Hello and welcome to another video. I'm Nymphy Pixie and this is how I made my Dead by Daylight totem prop. I started with 3 4-inch skulls that I got from Walmart. Everything I used should be listed in the video's description below. First things first, none of them need any jaws. So I'm going to rip them off and I'm going to discard 2 of them because we only need 1. I'm going to clean up the plastic by removing these little hinge pieces, and I'm going to sand off all of the little mold lines and rough patches that are on the plastic, as well as scuff it all up so it can take paint better. Next, we have to visit the dentist and clip out a few of these teeth. None of these skulls have all of their teeth. It looks like they've had a really rough go of it, so we need to get rid of some of these little pearly whites. The skulls get the same treatment, removing mold lines and scuffing up the entire surface with some sandpaper so that it can take paint. One of the skulls seems to have a very large hole in its head, so I'm going to first trace out where I want it to be and then cut it out, followed by sanding off any rough edges just so everything is nice and smooth. I also cut out the bottom of the skull so the sticks have somewhere to go and I also have better access to the teeth. With a little thermoplastic, I fill out the teeth so they're not so thin. I give everything a once-over with 100% acetone. I want to remove all the factory paint as well as sort of melt the surface of the plastic just to make sure it can take paint very well. With some acrylic paint, I fill in the crevices of the sculpt so I can start some of the shadows and block in places that I want more contour. First with a dark brown and then a black in the deeper shadows. I sponge on a few layers of white to blend it all out and fill in the highlights. My big secret to making bones look old and dirty is wood stain. I'm going to give each bone a very wet covering and let it seep into every single nook and cranny, and then set it out into the sun to dry because it's going to take quite a few hours. Preparing the bones for the base is pretty much the same as in part 1. I sand all the surfaces very well, put some dark shades into all of the crevices for shadows, and then stipple on white to blend it all in together, and then slather it with some wood stain and let it cure. These are bones I had left over from other projects. For the wooden tripod, I did get 1-inch PVC. I could have used actual sticks, but I wanted it to be as close to prop accurate as I could, so I'm going to make it out of plastic. I cut them at staggered heights, 12, 13, and 14 inches. Sand the surface very well with very rough sandpaper. I use my heat gun on a very low setting to soften the PVC. Be very careful because it does get very hot. I'm using an old cutting board and a table to press it down so I can make a little spot that I can attach it to the skulls to later. None of the sticks are actually straight, so I use my heat gun again to lightly heat up the plastic and then bend it by hand so that I can get it to have some like curves and stuff. I use different tools because, again, it's very hot. Be careful you don't burn yourself. Once the PVC cools, it is going to keep its shape. You do have to be a little careful that you don't pinch and bend it because it can get really distorted, but as long as it doesn't look like a straight stick, it ends up looking pretty good. This is taped together, but this is the general idea of what I'm going for. Here you can kind of see how I attach the skulls to the PVC. I melted a little hole and I inserted a screw just to keep them secure and where I want them. To secure the base, I drill holes into each end of the plastic bones. I cut a piece of wire to thread through the bones and twist it secure. The wire allows for final posing and adjustments before I add the thermoplastics. To attach the PVC sticks, I used a wood burner to make some holes down at the base. I thread the wires through these holes, twist them secure, and stuff all the extra bits inside the tube. Now it can stand on its own 3 legs, and I use some tape to temporarily hold it together. Here is where I should have wrapped some wire around the screws and the skulls to secure it all down. I didn't, it's fine, but hindsight is 20/20. After heating up some thermoplastic beads, I squish it up into the tube, press it into the twisted wires and the holes very well. While everything is still melty, I add a second blob into the wires to secure everything together in the corners. I set it on some parchment paper so it won't stick and do all final adjustments. When the thermoplastic cools, it'll be very rigid and the whole thing will be super secure. I covered all the screws and joined the skulls together with more thermoplastic. I will have to touch up paint, but this thing isn't going anywhere. Next, I go outside to make some toxic fumes. I use a wood burner to melt some holes where the branch details are going to go. Outside is about as well ventilated as I can get, and I am wearing a respirator. Now I make some wire spaghetti armatures for the branches. With some hot glue, I start the meticulous process of adding all of the little branch details to the prop. To bulk out the thicker branches, I squish in some aluminum foil and hot glue it into place. I squish and flatten out some more thermoplastic and cover all of the wire and foil in a thin sheet. I do my best to blend the edges into the PVC. Once cool, it hardens and is quite durable. I do the same thing for all of the thin branches. I found making a thin snaky of thermoplastic and wrapping it in a spiral before squishing it to be the most efficient way of covering all the wire. It took a few hours, but I got there. All the wires are covered, and it is actually really durable. Still a lot of work to go, but I am very proud at how this has come out so far. To make the bark texture, I'm using hot glue. I just drag the hot glue gun up and down the PVC and cover every single inch of it. In the hard-to-reach places, I squidge in a big glob and use a silicone tool to add in the lines that I couldn't get with the nozzle. As long as every inch of the PVC is covered, it ends up looking really good. You can see here how the texture ends up. It's pretty lumpy and bumpy, and I made sure to cover all of the branches and twigs that are coming out of it as well. Next, I prime the branches in black, making sure to get into every nook and cranny to give it a good base. This helps out with the shadows and depth later. To bring out the texture, I lightly sponge on some brown acrylics. I focus on mostly the center parts of the sticks, leaving a little bit of darkness down at the base and up at the skulls just to create some shadows. I then come in with a lighter brown to add in highlights, making sure I focus mostly on the places that light would hit specifically and on the ends of the branches and sticks so that they really show up. I put some wood stain into a sacrificial spray bottle and doused it. I covered the branches, I added more where the skulls are touching and inside, and more on the base. While that cures, I'm going to make all the extras. I tied some twine around the jawbone I had made earlier, cut out a circle of leather or cloth. I pinched about 16 holes into it just so that I could string some twine through there. I added some polyfill and closed it up. For the bottle, I used leftover EVA foam I had. I just cut out the general shape, added some contact cement, glued the pieces together. I filled in all the gaps with some quick seal and let it dry. I gave it a few coats of Plastidip just to seal it up. Using some red acrylic, I sponge it on, cover up the bottle. Use white for the label. I had some dark brown to add in the little details that I could see, and I weathered it with some wood stain. For the little skull, I rolled up some tin foil, added some polymer clay, and carved a skull. I'll probably replace it later because I'm not too happy with it, but I painted it silver and I hung all the pieces up. Add in some LED candles and it's done. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you next video. Bye.